A year had passed since my separation from Emily, and my life had taken an entirely unexpected turn. I had moved into a modest apartment downtown, far away from the house that had once echoed with the remnants of our shared life. My days had become calmer, filled with work, reading, and the occasional social gathering. It was a simple existence, free of any pretensions, yet it brought the peace I had longed for after the storm of our breakup. Since the final court proceedings, Emily and I had kept a strict silence, neither of us reaching out. The wounds from our separation were still fresh, and I convinced myself that the distance was for the best. I doubted my ability to face her without the resurfacing of anger and resentment. Then, one cold November evening, as I settled in for a quiet night, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was completely taken aback when I opened it to find Emily standing there. She looked hesitant, her posture uncertain, and her eyes held a mix of resolve and nervousness. "James," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I finally asked, my mind racing with confusion and cautious curiosity. "I know this is unexpected," she started, nervously wringing her hands, "but I need to talk to you. It's important." A flurry of questions filled my mind. Was she here to reopen old wounds, or had something serious happened? Despite my better judgment, I stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. She entered slowly, taking a seat at the very edge of my sofa, her body tense. I sat opposite her, maintaining distance. Whatever she was about to say, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. "It's about my father," she said at last, her voice barely a whisper. "Your father?" I repeated, frowning. "Richard," she continued. "Richard had always been a thorn in the side of our relationship. From the very start, he had made it clear that he didn't think I was good enough for his daughter. His constant interference had sparked countless arguments between Emily and me, widening the gap in our marriage. He's very ill," she added, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "The doctors say he doesn't have much time left, and he's been asking to see you." "To see me?" I asked, bewildered. "Why would he want to see me?" She hesitated, taking a deep breath before responding. "He wants to apologize, James. He feels responsible for what happened between us." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Richard, the man who had done everything in his power to drive a wedge between us, now wanted to make amends. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony, while another part of me seethed with anger. "I don't know, Emily," I said after a long pause. "This feels complicated. I know it's a lot to ask," she said quickly, her voice pleading, "but it would mean so much to him. And to me." I studied her face, searching for any hidden motives or deceit, but all I saw was sincerity and vulnerability. Despite everything that had happened, the hurt, the betrayal, a small part of me still cared about her. Witnessing her earnestness stirred something within me. After what felt like an eternity, I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "I'll do it." 2 days later, I found myself standing outside Richard's hospital room, bracing myself for the unexpected encounter ahead. My heart raced as Emily stood beside me, her expression unreadable, her usual composure hiding her true emotions. After a brief, almost imperceptible signal from her, I reached out and opened the door. Inside the room, Richard sat in a chair, looking fragile and diminished, no longer the imposing figure he once was. I had once known him well. His skin was pale, his frame slimmer than I remembered. Yet, when he saw me, his face lit up with a faint but sincere smile, despite the obvious effort it took to stay awake. His eyes shimmered with emotion. "James," he said, his voice rough but steady, conveying a sense of sincerity that took me by surprise. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, unsure how to reply. A storm of emotions swirled within me. For a long time, I had harbored bitterness toward this man, blaming him for much of the tension in my marriage. Now, here he was, vulnerable and seeking something I hadn't expected. Closure. He drew in a shallow breath before continuing. "I've been reflecting a lot on the past," he said, his gaze locked onto mine. "I realize now how much I disrupted things for you and Emily. I thought I was protecting her, but all I did was hurt both of you." His words hit me like a powerful wave, bringing an unexpected ache to my chest. Hearing Richard acknowledge his role in the pain that had shaped so much of my life, was more than I had expected. What we had endured together was both astonishing and strangely comforting. My throat tightened, and for a moment I was speechless. Finally, I managed to say, "I appreciate you saying that, but it wasn't entirely your fault. Emily and I made our own mistakes." A faint smile tugged at the corners of Richard's mouth, and his eyes softened. "Perhaps so," he murmured, "but I hope you can forgive an old man for his part in it." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, pity, and an odd sense of release. "I forgive you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. That conversation marked a turning point. After a period of bitterness and distance, it opened a path for Emily and me to reconnect. Not as a couple, but as allies in a shared effort to support her father during his final days. We didn't rehash old arguments or dwell on past hurts. Instead, we focused on the present, on how we could be there for Richard and for each other during such a challenging time. Richard passed away a few weeks later. At his funeral, Emily and I stood side by side, united not by love, but by a quiet mutual respect. In the days that followed, we found ourselves talking not about the mistakes we had made, but about the memories we had shared, the lessons we had learned, and the people we had become. We didn't reunite. That chapter of our lives had ended. But for the first time in years, I could look at Emily without feeling anger or resentment. Instead, there was a sense of peace, an acknowledgement of the good times we had shared and the growth that had emerged from our struggles. Months later, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. It was from Richard's lawyer, informing me that he had left me a small inheritance. Along with the money was a handwritten note. "James, thank you for forgiving me. Use this to begin something new. You deserve it. Richard." As I read the note, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Richard's words were simple yet profound, a final act of affirmation and generosity. That night, when Emily knocked on my door, I never imagined it would lead to this. Not a revival of romance, but a path toward healing and understanding. Life has a way of surprising you, and I've learned that forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts you can offer, not only to others but to yourself.